All right, you have found Advancing with Amy, and I'm Amy. Today we're talking to Sage Grayson. Sage is a former book editor turned life and business coach. Since 2011, she's been helping ambitious women edit their habits, routines, and mindsets to balance their happiness at work and home. As Sage likes to say, I'm a life editor, and so are you. Welcome, Sage.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Amy.
Oh, I'm happy to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, like you mentioned, I have been doing life and business coaching since 2011. I was a book editor before then, and I combined my two careers as a book editor and as a life coach. And I have this life editing framework, and I call my followers life editors because isn't that what we're doing? We're just trying to do the best we can in our lives. We're not looking for total makeovers. We're not throwing our old lives in the trash. We're just making tiny little edits to become the best versions of ourselves. So we're still
Love
ourselves,
that.
but the best versions of us.
Yes, I love that. I always try to do a little better each day.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
progress is still progress.
I agree. And I have been following you on your newsletter, which is just full of good freebies and fun little tidbits. I love that.
Thank you.
And it's so positive and upbeat. But I did read something that said it hasn't always been that way for you. Can you talk a little bit about your mental health journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So my most popular blog post on my blog, and I have more than 2,600 blog posts over the 14-ish years that I've been coaching. My most popular one is about my suicide attempt when I was 15. And I have heard from so many people before, naysayers saying, you can't be a life coach if you try to take your life. Who's going to hire you? Who is going to trust you? And I have found that has not been the case at all by me being vulnerable and sharing my mental health journey with my followers that I've actually gotten more paid clients. And people respect the vulnerability, the authenticity, because yes, I am naturally a happy, cheerful person, but it wasn't always that way. And I think there's value in showing that it's not all sunshine and rainbows, or some business owners kind of say that everything's perfect. It's the Instagram life, the filtered life. But many of us have some really, really deep struggles.
Yes, I agree. So I'm glad to see you've come so far. Would you talk a little bit about what you went through at 15?
Yeah. So I am a bisexual woman, and growing up in the early 90s, it was it was a different world. This is not a perfect world that we're living in now, but it was a different world then. And I didn't really feel like I belonged with like my straight friend or the straight kids in school or even the gay kids in school. And I think even now, this is a whole another discussion. There's a lot of pushback and bi erasure where people don't like to admit that bisexuals exist. They say, oh, just pick a side or whatever. It was a really, really rough time for me coming to terms with my sexuality. And also during that time, I was living with my biological parents and brother and was being abused. There's no
Oh,
funny way around that. But I was being tormented physically and mentally, and it really was not a safe place for me. I was every day was really horrific, honestly.
yes.
So I was being abused. I didn't really have like close friends or feel like where I could belong, struggling with my sexuality and nobody to talk to. And it was just like a really, really low place in my life. And honestly, the abuse had been going through my entire life. It didn't just start when I was 15. So I didn't have like a stable home life. And I really did not want to be alive anymore. Like, I remember thinking about suicide much earlier than 15. Must have been around 8, 9, or 10. I really started about thinking about
Oh,
killing myself, which, yeah, it's, it's pretty awful. But really, when I was 15, then I started planning and figuring out what I would do. And one night I just took all of the pills that I could find in my house. And I, if you read the blog post, it really goes into like my mental state and what I was thinking each section as I was going along. But basically, I lied down and I waited to die, and I was feeling so sick and so tired. And then I heard a voice. And this I learned later is called third man syndrome, which is based on a poem. Forgive me, I forget who wrote it. About it was a poem about two men who were hiking up a mountain, I believe, and they kept seeing a third man there with them, though there was only two of them. So third man syndrome is when you're going through a traumatic event, and it's based on the poem, that you notice someone else there with you to help you get through the traumatic event, whatever that might be. And I know like people are like, well, why is it called third man syndrome? Because of the poem, but it's really like a second man or some other being there with you. So in my case, this manifestation of another person there, when I was literally at the lowest point of my life, came to me as my future self, which is a little where you think, oh, it shouldn't be like an ancestor or someone you admire or something like that. No, it was actually me, but it was me from in the future. And when that me started talking to me, it made me believe that I could be happy again, that I could get away from my abusers, that I could find a place where I belonged, that I could help people like me. And I believed it. I believed that like I could have a happy future. And it was the
Wow.
hardest thing that I ever did. But I sat up and I called 911. And sorry, it takes me right back
No,
to
that's
how
okay. You got
miserable I
me
was.
crying.
But then for the years following, a lot of people admit that third man, the person who helps you with your trauma, sticks around. And for me, she absolutely did. So I think many people will relate to this, that when you attempt suicide and you survive, that's not the end of it. I was suicidal for many, many, many years after that. But the thing that kept me going forward was the hope that I could have a happier life, that I could get away from my abusers, that I could find some joy and peace and love. And I felt that future me many times over the years, preventing me from killing myself again. And sometimes it got really, really close, but she was always there. And as I got older, and as I did cut away from my biological family, I moved across the country, I changed my name, I really started over again. There's been at least 3 separate instances in my life where I've lost all of my possessions and had to like start again from scratch. I'm like the queen of resilience. But as I got older and I started coaching, uh, I started hearing myself say the things that my future self would tell me. And now I feel like we're combined into one person. And I think my story of being able to get away from abuse and be able to make a happier life for myself is important. And I don't think that makes me a, a wild card life coach or a bad life coach. I think it makes me a better life coach. Because when I tell my clients, like, you can come back from anything, you can have a happy life again, you can find meaning and joy. I really,
Yeah.
really believe it. It's not just fluff that maybe somebody who hasn't experienced deep sadness would say. It's the difference between sympathy and empathy. I have literally been there. Um,
Wow.
so I think it's important for me to share my story, despite people saying that it undermines my credibility.
Well, I don't think it does at all. And I agree with you that it only makes you a better life coach because you understand where other people might be coming from.
Mhm.
So I appreciate you being so open and vulnerable.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I got all teary because when I was 18, I did something very similar. I took a bottle of pills and
Mhm.
drank a bottle of vodka, and I was praying for the same thing.
Yeah.
And all I got was incredibly sick, and then I was disappointed. So I understand. I've been there, and you're right. It can get better, and that's why I do this podcast is I want people to know that there is hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that my experience with suicide has invoked in me is that when I'm working with my clients, a lot of times it feels like they're waiting for the next shoe to drop. They're waiting for some horrible calamity to come to them, and it makes them nervous and apprehensive and playing small. Like, I can't do this. What if something bad is going to happen? And the way that I try to frame it to them is that, like, worrying doesn't really help us. It just kind of eats up the time that we have. But I ask them, what if the worst thing that will ever happen to you in your entire life has already happened? And people ask me, well, how can you be so happy with all that stuff that happened to you in your life? Because the worst thing that will ever happen to me in my life has already happened. And I
Yeah.
survived it. My entire life is icing. My entire life going forward is sunshine and rainbows, even when I'm sick or even when, like, I don't know, I'm not getting as many sales as I want, or even if my favorite TV show is canceled or whatever. Like, everything in my life is joyous because I have already survived the worst thing that will ever happen to me. So people are just waiting for the worst thing to happen. But what if it already happened? Most
Right.
people live, not to be rude, but most people live pretty mundane, average lives. Maybe that jerk breaking up with you in college was the worst thing that will ever happen to you. Maybe that unfortunate death that has already happened in your family was the worst thing. Like, most people just live these normal, mundane lives. So if we can stop thinking that there's some huge catastrophe looming on the horizon and we start acting like we are already past the worst thing, then everything is more joyous. Then you can start taking risks. Then you can start, like, going for big things and choosing big, enormous goals. You can start putting yourself out there, flaws and all, because who cares? You're past the worst thing in your life. So I try to instill my clients with that idea, like, worrying serve no purpose. Instead, imagine that the best days of your life are literally in front of you. Not the worst days, but the best days.
Yeah, that is beautiful. I love that. So tell me wh- besides the third man syndrome, which I think is incredible because as soon as you said your future self showed up, I thought that's full of hope
Mhm.
because there is a future self. So that alone says something. But I wonder what did you do to improve your mood or to get better? What helped you get to the point you are now?
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I had this vision of my future self and how she was how she acted, how she would help the world, how she was confident and strong, how she didn't give a damn what people thought. So it was easy for me to start acting as if I were her already. I could pull her into existence because I saw her. I saw her so clearly. I knew exactly how she would handle this problem. And when I was feeling down on myself, I'd be like, well, what would she do? How would she talk to this person? How would she solve this? I know that's not possible for everyone. And I certainly don't want people to have a near death experience to be able to connect with their future self. But here's another idea that I offer my clients is to create a persona. And for, like, my business clients, it's a business persona. Or for my life coaching clients, it's this life persona. So this persona could be anyone, like the top person in your field. Or It could be a character from a TV show or a movie that you really admire. So sometimes I like to think from Legally Blonde, how would Elle Wood solve this problem? With smarts and spunk. That's how I
Yes.
roll. So think about that. So if you are top of your field, whatever your field, how would Taylor Swift solve this problem? I don't know. Or how would Hermione Granger solve this problem?
Hmm.
So choose a persona, and when you don't feel like you have the strength to make a decision or to move forward or to do something big and scary, just think of what would that persona, what would that person do in that experience, and then do that. Like I'm lucky that I was able to imagine my future self being strong and capable. But if you can't imagine yourself ever being in that place, then borrow that strength from somebody else, real or imagined. They could be a fictionalized person, but borrow their strength and do what they would do, because you know that person, that figure, that character that you admire, they want the best for you too.
I think that's great advice. And I liked the idea of choosing a persona. I'm not sure who I'd pick, so I'm going to have to think on that one, but I'm definitely going to try that.
Yeah.
So, do you do other things like journal or anything like that?
Yeah. So kind of related to picking your persona, there's this exercise called Petition the Universe. And it comes from the book Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. I don't know how many of you remember the book, but in the book, Elizabeth is on a road trip with a friend and she's upset because her ex, or hopefully soon to be ex, will not sign the divorce papers. And he's drawing it out and making everyone miserable. So her friend's like, okay, let's write a petition to the universe and have everyone in the world sign it who would support this divorce, who would support this divorce for your mental and physical health, for the good of the world. And they just started writing names, all sorts of crazy names: Michael J. Fox, Kermit the Frog, all sorts of people. Like, of course, Mr. Rogers would support this too. And they just wrote and wrote and wrote all of these names of people who would support the divorce. And then a few hours later, got a phone call from her lawyer, and her ex finally signed the papers. So putting that goodness out into the universe, that positivity out into the universe, and just feeling like there are all of these people supporting you. I recommend writing a petition to the universe. I actually have a printable for that on my website, sagegrayson.com, and it's free. But for my clients, when they're struggling, like one of my clients has a witchy spiritual business, and it's great. But she was feeling really kind of down, like, who's going to want a spiritual coach? Who's going to hire me? Am I too weird? All of that stuff. And I'm like, no, no, no. Let's petition the universe and let's write down all of the witches who would support you, who are like, yes, you deserve to have a thrilling, thriving, witchy business. So he wrote down Hermione Granger, Glinda the Good Witch, Matilda, all of the witches that we could think of. And she's doing great because she feels like she has all of that support in the universe. So that is a journaling technique that I love to do. Like, if I'm not feeling it, who would feel it? Who would support me being successful?
Wow, that is fun too.
And
Yeah.
I know it's a cheesy old book, but Eat, Pray, Love is still one of my favorite books because there's so many great ideas. And of course, it's a whole book about moving forward after the worst part of your life.
Yes, this is bad, but I didn't read the book, but I saw the movie, so I know what you're talking about.
That's good enough. That's good enough. I'll take that.
Exactly, it works. Well, I just love your energy. You have such positive energy, so I appreciate that. If if someone was in your shoes, especially if they're a teenager and that kind of thing, like you're talking about at 15 or even, older adult, what would you recommend if they're going through something similar and they feel like they're stuck with their family that is abusive or negative? What would you recommend?
Yeah. I know this, especially in the queer community, that though we have made leaps and bounds in the past few decades, it's still not a safe world for many of us. And some of us, well, you can just, I think it's ignorant and rude to be like, well, just come out of the closet, be proud. that might be incredibly dangerous for people to, and I don't want anyone doing something like in the name of pride that could literally get you killed.
Right.
So if you are in a bad place, if you're being abused, if you can reach out to someone, reach out to the suicide help centers, reach out to social workers or anyone who can help you. If that's not an option, then I would make a list of all of the things that you're going to enjoy once you're able to get out of the abuse. So for me, I was still in high school. I had no money, no resources, no support. And I knew I wanted to do big things in the world. And this was in the 90s, where if you really wanted to get a job, you really needed a college degree. Might not be the same right now, but I knew I needed to stick with these people because, how do I say that? My family was wealthy. So I knew they would pay for my college. If I could stick with this and get them to pay for my college, I would have a whole bright future ahead of me. I didn't need to explode my life and run away from home at 15 and sleep under a bridge and who knows what as a queer person on the street. I did not need to do that. So I bided my time. I did what I could. I kept away from them when I could. I didn't I wasn't triggered by they're trying to like poke me and get me to start a fight with them. I spent as much time as I could away from them at school. I joined all sorts of clubs, all sorts of things, so I would be out of the house more often and away from them. And then I picked a school that was not in driving distance, so I was even further away from them. And I basically put my head down and survived. And
Wow.
after I graduated from college, then I was able to confidently get a job to support myself, get my own place, and I cut ties with them completely. And I've had people say, well, that's really callous of you. That's really cruel to get them to pay not hundreds, the tens of thousands of dollars for your education and then cut them off completely. But the way that I see it, I would gladly give them back the money for my college degree as soon as they give me back my childhood.
Right. Oh, I'm with you. And it's such an empowering story because I think you saw that future hope from such a young age that you were able to gather your senses and center yourself and think, what do I want in the future and where do I want to be and what do I need to get there? So that shows a lot of strength on your part.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I still have clinical lifelong depression, which I am very vocal about too with my audience. In fact, we're recording this during Neurodiversity Celebration Week. And again, this is another place where sometimes I'm accepted and sometimes I'm not. That the bundle that I'm working with this week accepts people who have anxiety disorders or depressive disorders as part of the neurodivergent umbrella. But there have been other people who say, no, just because you're depressed, you are not included with us and other mental disorders. So that's always kind of like a gatekeeping issue going on too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I say you're included. I have ADHD and I have a daughter on the spectrum and I have bipolar disorder, which is considered neurodiverse as well. And so anytime your brain works differently than the regular population, then I would say you could be part of our tribe.
Thank you.
And
Thank
I
you.
want to go back to what you said about coming out and it not being safe. I agree with that. I also want to say, especially when you're bisexual and you don't look maybe gay or whatever, that looks like,
Yeah.
it's not a one-time thing. It's I'm bisexual and you don't come out one time. You have to come out at work. You have to come out when there's new employees. You have to come out to your family. Yeah, I mean,
Over
and
and over.
every time you meet somebody new, if you get into a friendship with them, eventually you have to say something to them.
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah, it's a weight.
Yeah. Definitely coming out is not a one-time deal,
Right.
especially For those of you who might be watching the video, I look like a regular straight woman with my makeup and my jewelry and my long hair. And I think that's kind of hurtful to assume things about people. I remember joining the a gay, lesbian, straight alliance, whatever, in college. And it was a couple months. Everyone thought I was just an ally there to support them. And I'm like,
Oh,
oh, I'm bi. I'm actually queer too. And
right.
we're just like shocked. They're like, oh, we thought you were just like hanging out like our straight friend. I'm like, no. And that was the thing. Like being bisexual in this world is like kind of that in between muddly gray space to all sorts of things I've been told, like when I go on dates or whatever, some people assume that I'm never going to be monogamous because I'm bisexual. I'm
I have heard that.
like that's not true. Like if you like women, do you like every woman in the world? Are you going to date and be attracted to every woman in the world? No. And just because I like men and women doesn't mean I'm attracted to everyone and has nothing to do about whether
Right.
I'm monogamous or not. Uh,
Exactly. And I just recently had my hair cut short, so I feel like
yeah.
I kind of fit in a little better now with that side, but there is a divide. They think that if you're bisexual, you're wild and it's definitely got its own little traits they put with it,
Yeah.
and they're not always true. They're stereotypes. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate you talking about that. It needs to be talked about more.
Absolutely. It is unfortunate. This is by erasure that I see out there. Like, and I was married to a man for 17 years. I've been divorced for 6. But people thought, oh, so you're actually straight. I'm like, no, I'm still a bisexual who's just married to a man. And if I marry a woman in the future, that doesn't make me any less bisexual. That doesn't make me lesbian. It's just something inherent in me. And
Mhm.
just because I'm with a certain person doesn't negate that other part of me.
Right. Oh, I love that. And I think it's very similar to my daughter is biracial.
Mhm.
And so I think sometimes she doesn't feel like she fits in at school with the white crowd or the black crowd. She's just kind of like in the middle going, where do I fit? And that's kind of how it is when you're bisexual.
And I'm bisexual even when I'm not dating anyone too.
Yes. Yes.
And nobody would question that if a straight person wasn't dating at the moment or was taking a break to focus on school or work or whatever. They would still say that's still a straight person.
Right. But for some reason, I think they think that you're asexual all of a sudden, or
I have been just because I'm not currently dating at the moment. People were saying, "Oh, did you get divorced because you're ace?" And I'm like, "No." No. I'm still bisexual though I'm not actively sexing anyone up right now.
I think it just goes to show that people are still, even in a world where we're much more open than we were, like you said, in the 90s, and things are better than they were, there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, there's definitely still a long way to go.
Well, Sage, I have really enjoyed talking to you today. I could talk to you a long time.
Okay, that's been great. Thank you so much for having me.
You are very welcome. Is there anything you want to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, I guess my biggest takeaway is that we think that people are judging us more than maybe they really are. And if we could just be our authentic selves, flaws and all, and put it out there, we would be helping so many more people because you never know who's watching you. If there's someone who's afraid to come out, but watching you inspires them, or if there's someone who's dealing with mental health struggles and they see you and they see you that you became happy after an awful period, that is inspiring. That's hopeful. And I think if more people were honest about their mental health struggles, we would have more hope and we would have fewer awful stories in the news.
I
And that's really
agree.
what I want to put out there, is that I'm not perfect, and I want everyone to see my imperfect self.
Oh, I love that. That's so beautiful. Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking with you today, and I hope that you have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye. As we come to a close on this deeply moving and candid conversation with Sage Grayson, I want to thank her for sharing her compelling story and invaluable insights with all of us today. Her strength and resilience are a testament to the power of being true to oneself and the importance of seeking joy and support even in the darkest of times. Sage's journey from battling with mental health disorders and family abuse to becoming an inspiring life and business coach reminds us that our past does not define our future. With Sage's life editing framework and unique methods like connecting with the future self or petitioning the universe, we've seen how transformative her approach can be for women looking to balance happiness at work and home. If Sage's message resonated with you and you're interested in learning more about her life editing framework, or you want to embrace your inner life editor, I've got some fantastic news. Sage is offering all listeners of Advancing with Amy an exclusive free gift, a tool that could be your first step towards editing your life for the better. You will find a link to Sage's free gift in my show notes. And before we part ways, if you found value in today's episode, please hit that subscribe button and share this podcast with your friends. Let's spread the word and create a powerful community of mental health warriors. Thank you once again for tuning in to Advancing with Amy and spending your time with us. Your support means the world, and together we can continue to break down barriers and destigmatize conversations around mental health. Stay strong, keep fighting, and remember to keep advancing, warriors.